City University of Hong Kong is an international university which emphasizes the integration of research and teaching. The university promotes diversified, cross-cultural studies through various educational programs. To promote our educational vision, City University of Hong Kong produced a series called Beyond Boundaries, Dialogue with Presidents of World's Leading Educational Institutions. Professor Way Kuo, President of City University of Hong Kong, talks to presidents of universities and principals of high schools around the world, exploring each other's strengths and looking forward to the future direction of educational development. Named after the first president of the United States, George Washington University is located in the heart of the U.S. capital, Washington, D.C., near important government institutions such as the Department of State and Department of the Treasury, as well as international organizations such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. George Washington University's geographical proximity to the political center has enabled it to produce a large number of political, diplomatic, and legal leaders for the United States and the world. Since its establishment in the early 19th century, George Washington University has produced two Secretaries of State, John Foster Dulles and Colin Powell, 28 state governors, 128 members of the Senate and House of Representatives, and several foreign heads of state or government. The founding of George Washington University was indeed related to President George Washington. During his lifetime, George Washington advocated for the establishment of a national university in the U.S. capital. In 1821, a private Columbian college was established by an act of Congress. In 1904, the significantly developed Columbian College decided to change its name to George Washington University in honor of the U.S. Founding Father. The current president of George Washington University is Professor Mark S. Wrighton. He was the chancellor of another university named after Washington for 24 years, Washington University in St. Louis. That university also has an historical connection with George Washington University. In 1853, the predecessor of George Washington University, who was a graduate from Columbian College, William Greenleaf Eliot, founded with colleagues the Eliot Seminary in St. Louis in Missouri, which has developed into the world-renowned Washington University in St. Louis today. The university has produced 25 Nobel Prize laureates, including the first female winner of the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, Gertie Teresa Corey. For its achievements in research and education, the university is known as a hidden ivy. We are honored to invite Professor Mark S. Wrighton, who served as Chancellor of Washington University in St. Louis for 24 years, and is now President of George Washington University, to share his experience and vision of leading those two prestigious universities. Professor Way Kuo, president of City University of Hong Kong, is well known for his research on the reliability of electronic systems and nuclear energy. In his early years, he worked at Bell Laboratories in the United States, who held the position of department head and dean of the School of Engineering in an American university, and was conferred academicians in various countries. Professor Way Kuo has served as the president of CityU for more than 10 years. His philosophy of education is summarized in the lyrics of the CityU anthem, which he wrote, "Learn and question beyond boundaries." Professor Way Kuo has also published several books about education. He is particularly concerned about the challenges facing contemporary education around the world.
春风先发，院中梅。阴杏桃李，次第开。季花鱼夹，生春里。一道春风为我来。The poem was written by Bai Juyi 1200 years ago in the capital of Tang Dynasty to cherish its cherry blossoms. And now this is a cherry blossom in Washington D.C, the capital of the United States of America. And they both share with the prosperity of the society at that moment. As we know, today, we are so pleased to carry the conversation with President Mark Wrighton. The George Washington University has been known to graduate many important statesmen who served the government of the United States. Mark has served as the chancellor of that university for 24 years. Since then, with your outstanding service, Mark has also been the president of the George Washington University. Mark, I'm so glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit more about these two great universities and how they are connected.
Well, George Washington University is celebrating its 201st year. I have had the privilege of working at the other Washington University, the one in St. Louis. As you noted, William Greenleaf Eliot was a co-founder of Washington University in St. Louis and one of the earliest graduates of what was Columbian College that became George Washington University. Both of these institutions are private research universities, and it's been a privilege to have the opportunity to be involved with both. St. Louis and Washington, D.C. are both fine cities, but I have to acknowledge that Washington, D.C. is far more vibrant and far more well-known than St. Louis. And I found that the move from St. Louis to Washington to be very stimulating. I wrapped up as chancellor in the summer of 2019. However, when I assumed the presidency here at George Washington University, we were in the midst of a very significant rise of the COVID-19 called Omicron. And so I dived in, and I've been very privileged to work with really talented people here to overcome many of the challenges. In fact, many people ask me, what is it that is going to contribute to being a great leader. It's having great colleagues.
The outstanding management team is not the only factor that brings George Washington University success. The university has also been actively seeking social endowment to promote the university's teaching and research, recruit and to retain excellent scholars. The abundant social endowment enabled the university to get fruitful accomplishment in teaching and research.
You are certainly a great leader for our century, and this is unusual, has such a long, outstanding services to two great universities, in particular at this moment, the George Washington University.
Yes, serving, a lengthy tenure is unusual in these times. These are very challenging positions, and at Washington University in St. Louis, I was privileged to be able to work with very talented colleagues, and they were wonderful in terms of their dedication, their creativity, and it takes a large team to lead a great university like Washington University or George Washington University. I do have appreciation for the contributions of others, and I would also note that students and staff also make a huge difference. Students come to Washington, D.C. to make a difference in the world, and some of those outstanding graduates of George Washington University came here to do something significant in their lives, and they've done it.
Well, certainly you have mentioned, I think, a key word that makes the U.S. universities very successful. You mentioned the teaming, the teamwork. And certainly the teaming is, in my opinion, is a key word for the higher education in the United States. Speaking of the higher education in the United States, I call it the American way of the higher education. For example, endowment and fundraising. Those are very unique. And both universities in St. Louis and in Washington, D.C., the George Washington University and Washington University, they both have a big endowment. And can you share with us some of the thoughts and how this have evolved over years?
Yes, well, we mentioned William Greenleaf Eliot.
Yes.
I would say that he initiated a tradition of fundraising at Washington University in St. Louis. He was tireless in his efforts to build support for the university. The endowment provides the financial foundation that enables a great university to pursue outstanding programs, to attract and retain outstanding members of the faculty, and to sustain the continuing development and maintenance of outstanding facilities. If you have a strong endowment, you're also able to attract talented students independent of their financial circumstance. That is a wonderful tradition that we have here at George Washington University, and we were able to sustain it at Washington University thanks to generous donations that contributed to the development of the endowment. In addition to the contributions, you also need to be mindful of the importance of management of the endowment. And I know that many of the listeners to this program are in Hong Kong. It's a great financial hub, and I believe that financial management is a key to a successful endowment.
Well, I think this is certainly very valuable input to the people in Hong Kong, because endowment has not been a concept for the local community in Hong Kong Well, certainly it has not been a culture for many other places, but everybody learning this American way. I guess endowment can sustain the operation of a university, certainly including faculty recruitment. And you have been very successful in recruiting faculty. And tell us a little bit more about the faculty.
Recruiting faculty is a key to having a successful university. Recruiting faculty both at the beginning level as junior professors, as assistant professors, is incredibly important. Refreshment of the faculty with people who have new ideas, new programs, and bring a vibrancy is very important. At the same time, there are super achieving individuals that everyone would like to recruit to their university. And so sometimes it's important to extend yourself and invest heavily in recruiting one of these super achievers. At Washington University, I placed some emphasis on recruiting really talented people who had already achieved a great deal. Faculty members in the United States are always in what we call free agency. And they're free agents. They can move whenever they have an exciting opportunity. So we need to focus on both recruiting and retention, because we have stars that we do not want to leave. And so this is another important use of the endowment. Endowment will enable us to maintain great relations with our most outstanding faculty.
Well, you have done an outstanding job in this regard, and this is, people can see it and success. But there's one question about it. It's about tuition. Certainly there are many views about tuitions. Namely, the private universities, such as two universities you have been associated with, they seem to have a higher tuition, like an Ivy League school tuition. Can you share with us the tuition business, which has commonly argued by people outside the United States that, Americans pay too high tuition?
Tuition is a very important revenue stream for both public and private universities. The Ivy League is certainly a great group of institutions, but one of the things that makes the United States unique is that though we all say we are educating students, doing original research, providing service to society, and those that have medical schools provide clinical care, we do those different missions in a different way. Each institution has the privilege of executing its mission in a unique way. I would not want to be a Xerox copy of Harvard University or any other institution. We need to develop both distinguished programs and distinguishable programs. What is it that we can do uniquely well and attract talented students and faculty in those missions? For George Washington University, for example, being here in Washington, D.C., we have a great program in international affairs. Being in Washington, D.C., just 4 blocks from where we sit, 4 blocks west of the White House, and just a few more blocks to Capitol Hill, we're in a very strong position to make important contributions to international affairs, including U.S. policy.
Well,
you mentioned Colin Powell.
Yes.
As an alumnus of the George Washington University. He's an example of the kind of individual who can make a difference in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, through this conversation, you can tell that Mark himself is a living dictionary of the higher education in the United States. In this conversation, we understand the general picture of the American ways in terms of campus autonomy, the fundraising, and the research importance, recruiting and retaining faculty members, and the university comes today. Just what the Tang Dynasty, the poetry I have described it. It's like the cherry blossoms in Washington D.C. Thank you very much. We believe you all have enjoyed this program.
In the episode of next week, Professor Way Kuo, president of City University of Hong Kong, is going to visit one of the largest Jewish universities in the world. This university cultivates plenty of scientific research talents and leaders for Israel, and actively nurtures startups on the campus. Tel Aviv University in Israel.